Hello and welcome to our guest speaker. Valerie is a graphic designer and she's going to introduce a little bit more about herself. I will point out that on our guest speaker page, you have links to her portfolio and other information about her so you can follow up. And the recording link will go here later this week. So welcome, Valerie. I know Valerie from having worked with her at the California Virtual Campus Online Education Initiative, where she does amazing work to help our students. And so I'm very excited to have her here to talk to all of you. Valerie, I know you're very familiar with Zoom, but I'll mention to everyone else, there is a share screen at the bottom for you, Valerie. And if you want to show some of your work, or if you want me to go through your website or anything, just let me know. For everyone else, once we share, you may have a lot of little pictures. You can click on the top of those pictures to minimize them so you can see the full screen. And we're going to do about half an hour, 45 minutes where Valerie will talk and I'll ask her questions. And then those of you that have questions, please put them in the chat and I'll call on you to ask them. Put a question with 2 question marks in front of it so we can find it easily. And then I'll call on you so you can speak your questions if you can talk, or I'll read your questions if you can't, because I know a few of you don't have microphones. That was very fast, sorry. Valerie, welcome. Please introduce yourself and please share.
Awesome, thanks for having me. So I'm Valerie. I am a freelance graphic designer and I work almost exclusively with nonprofit and education clients. So I can show you real quick. I'll share my screen. Let's see. All right, can you see that, Kate?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is my portfolio and I kind of started out doing a lot of print work. And like I said, I do mostly nonprofit and education work. And so have been more recently moving into doing more web design. And so that includes simple landing page designs and then working with a developer to make those. And then I'll also work with small nonprofits to make a logo and do a brand board and a style guide for them. And then I'll do a lot of, report designs for big reports and kind of everything. This is like a t-shirt design right here I did. That was fun.
So I'm going to stop you for 1 second, Valerie. So a lot of people here are going forward in graphic design. That's their passion and their desire. But there's a range. This is, careers in the visual arts and portfolio, and it's all the visual arts. So could you tell a little bit about what a style guide is for anyone?
Yeah, sure.
Who may not know?
So branding is basically, it's not just a logo. It's every kind of interaction that you have with a brand. It's how you feel when you see something about the brand. So that could include the colors, the photography, the typography, the patterns, anything that you think about a brand, it's how it makes you feel. So when I create a brand for a client, we might do a logo, but that's just one aspect. And so I'll create a style guide that explains, exactly what colors to use. And it'll include the hex codes and CMYK and RGB so that they get the exact color right. And then explain to them which fonts to use for headings versus like body text. And then show them examples of photography they should use. And then, just so basically how to use the brand assets on all different kinds of marketing materials or, just across the entire brand. Anytime you would create something and design something for a client, it's the colors and fonts and logos, Yeah,
and that's an interesting thing because having worked like 2 degrees separated from where Valerie was, the fact that for a lot of nonprofits and a lot of educational areas, while Valerie would be called upon to do the big things, they are then getting used by a lot of people. And if there isn't a style guide that clearly says do this and don't do that, the kind of vision can get blurred very quickly. I think it's a really important tool, particularly for nonprofits where there may be other people who are actually doing some of the, using this for presentations or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's just kind of a brief overview of my portfolio. And I'm always kind of changing it, and it took me a long time to build it up. Because, I am pretty self-taught. So a lot of my first work was volunteer work, and just had a few things on my portfolio, and I'm just constantly adding to it, and constantly learning new skills to be able to add to it. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I sent you some questions, and I think, there's two pieces here that are really interesting, particularly. One is the fact that you are a business person. And so if you could talk a little bit about what that means for your creativity and for being a graphic designer. And then you also are a very creative person, and how you balance those two sides of your experience.
Yeah, definitely. So when I first decided to leave my full-time job and go do freelance, it was pretty terrifying, because all you ever hear about is how difficult it is to run a business. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of design podcasts, and they were really influential in getting me to take that leap, because a lot of people who start out wanting to do freelance, it seems so intimidating, but it's just a lot of hustle. It's just constantly hustling to try to find new clients. And then eventually, I think it's taken me 2 years of constantly trying to find new clients, that I have enough clients that I almost always have very steady work, but it takes a lot. So I would say about a third of my time is spent doing business related things. So that includes sending invoices, paying taxes, just emailing clients about where I am on the project, and then also trying to find new work. And then I would say 2/3 of the time is spent actually doing work. And so that could be really creative, and it could be super fun and exciting. Like, today I am working on creating the brand guide for a really small nonprofit that I'm excited about. And that is it requires a lot of creativity. And then there are other days, like all last week, where I designed a report, and that's just laying something out in InDesign. And that doesn't take a lot of creativity. It takes skill, but it doesn't take a lot of creativity. So it ends up being like half and half. And I think it's, when you work for yourself, you also kind of have to constantly make sure that you are fueling your creativity. So, staying up to date with what trends are out there and finding ways to get involved with other designers to see what they're doing. So it's a lot of moving parts that you have to be good at staying really organized and staying on top of your work. If you're working for yourself and having to do all these different roles on your own. Yeah.
So when I look at your page, there seems to be, there's diversity without question, but there also seems to be a kind of vision in terms of them. I wouldn't be surprised that these were designed by the same person. How did you get to that sensibility, and what is it that you think is your flavor almost as a designer?
Yeah, my style is really bright and very fun. And, I've seen a lot of designers are kind of moving toward this more subtle look, and a lot of like creams, and everything's very soft. And that's just not my style. And I think, when I first started off, I would try to just kind of recreate what someone else did. But then started finding that I would always be drawn more towards the bright, fun, poppy look. And so I would just do a lot of mood boards. Like when I worked at Foothill College, I had this huge board in my office that anytime I saw a design that just struck my fancy, that got me excited, I would print it out and cut it out and put it up in this huge mood board. And it was covered with, rainbow colors, and it's glittery, and it's just fun and happy. And so I just found over and over that was the style I was personally drawn to. And I liked doing that style. And so I would create work that looked like that. And so because of that, I would attract clients who liked that and who would ask me, oh, I love, they would see something in my portfolio and say, I love how you did this. Can you do something like that for us? And so that kind of goes into, I create work that I want to attract. I put things on my portfolio that I want people to hire me for. So if I did a project that like, I just didn't think looked that good, I do not put it up because I don't want anyone to see that and think, oh, that's what she does. I only post, I only put up, I only show the things that make me happy, like that I would respond to if I saw on a marketing piece.
That's so interesting because about half the people are in the careers in the visual arts, and that's and another half are making a portfolio this quarter, and there's actually a lot overlap between them. So they're very interested in, and I have actually said exactly what you say, put in your portfolio what you want to end up doing, because if you're showing stuff you don't like doing, that's what people are going to call you to do. It's just like inevitable that happen. It's like you have to be really focused on that. Do you have, so this is your portfolio. When you click on it, can you show people what happened? Although they can go and you can sort of talk about your decision-making process and how you're sharing your project.
Sure. So so this is for Foothill Dance International. We decided to rebrand them, or they decided to rebrand, and we actually redid the logo, which they didn't plan on doing. But this was kind of a long process. And I actually did also help with not just design, but that has taken me years to get to a point where I can help with additional marketing things. Mm-hmm. So just starting off on a project, and explaining it in here, I explain my process, and my process always starts with research. So I'll research the company, I'll research competitors, I'll research like past pieces they've done. But then I'll also go through and kind of get a basic idea of what I want to do for a project and create a mood board. And so I kind of explained that process. For this brand refresh and style guide, we actually did focus groups. So I got to include that information. But for my portfolio, what I try to do is just talk through the story. Like, how did we get to that process? So that always starts with a brief explanation of who the company or organization is and what they do. And then I'll move on to the research step and explain what I did for that and what I discovered. And then for this one, I explain what we did with the brand refresh and what our thinking was behind it, as well as the style guide that came from that. So for this one, I kind of explained in the text above, they already had set colors that they've been using for the past 10 years, but they're really dull and just like kind of more boring. And like I said before, my style is very bright and eye-catching. And I think just having brighter colors is more modern. And so we created this color palette that would be really friendly and welcoming. And then choosing the fonts and what my thought process behind that. And so one thought process for education and nonprofit is they don't have a lot of money to spend on fonts. And so some clients will want custom fonts, and that costs a lot. And so explaining that's something I think about. And then photography, and talking about how we want photography to show confidence and showing them how they could be used. And so that people can see in action what the photography would look like. And then also whenever you do a logo design, it's like a common joke I've heard amongst designers that you always put it on a tote bag. So I put the logo on a tote bag so people could see what it, mock it up. When you create a portfolio, if you do a logo, if you do a brochure, there are a ton of free mock-ups in Photoshop where you just click and replace it with your logo, and it shows what your logo or your print piece or whatever you designed would look like. If you do a poster, it'll show a poster hanging up on a wall somewhere. And I think that really elevates a portfolio than just placing a logo. And then for here too, you know, I mocked this up. This isn't their Instagram, but I wanted to show what it could look like if we, you know, use these colors and use their logo and use their photography style in the way that I was recommending to them. And then for style guides, you know, a lot of times people don't need to see the specifics. So this is a style guide I was talking about before, and just kind of briefly showing what it looks like. And for me, for my portfolio pages, I'm always trying to get inspired by what other people are doing. So if you go on dribble.com or behance.com, there are people, they have, you know, it's like portfolio sites, and they'll have what their work looks like. And so you can see all these different ways that people are mocking up their work to show it, instead of just placing it on the page. So, and that's more of just the style guide. So, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
So what do you like best about what you do, and what do you like least?
So best, I love, I kind of knew that I wanted to work specifically in design with nonprofits, because I like social justice is extremely important to me. It's like what gets me fired up. And I would see these nonprofits who were doing amazing work, but their brochure was so bad, or their website, it looks really bad. It doesn't look professional. And that always frustrated me, because I knew, I was like, I could make this look really good, and people would know that, you know, they're doing great work and they look professional, so they like they're more trustworthy. So that's what I love that I can give to, you know, organizations who are doing good. I elevate their work. I am using my skill set because, you know, I'm not a social worker or, you know, something that's like in the field, but I can use my design skill set to help people still. And that's what I really love about it. It's like, I care about the things I'm designing. I would say what I don't love is just, I mean, kind of what I said earlier, being a freelancer is hard. It's a lot of hustle in the beginning and throughout. And it is nice when you kind of have someone always giving you the same work over and over, and giving you, like, you don't have to go looking for work. So it's just hard being a freelancer. But on the other coin of that, it's great to have the flexibility of working for myself. You know, I can go grocery shopping in the middle of the day. You know, I have that ability to work when I feel like, okay, I'm feeling creative. And if I don't feel like I'm feeling creative, I will just go for a long walk and disconnect from technology. And that really helps me in my creative process. And I can do that whenever I want. So it's pretty nice.
So in terms of, we had another graphic designer who came and talked about some of the work that he did, where he would end up, you know, doing many hours. Can you estimate, I mean, how many hours a week do you work, and how often are you on like deadline and have to do crazy hours and stuff like that? Yeah.
So for the most of the time, I do not work crazy hours, but that is really important to me. I kind of set out to make it very clear that, like, when at the latest 6 o'clock comes, I stop working, and I remove myself, because, you know, my office is in my house. So I think a lot of people have a hard time with disconnecting those. I say this in that I recently had just super busy weeks, but even my super busy is doing actual creative work for 40 hours a week, but that's it. And I'm pretty good at giving myself larger deadlines. And I think that my clients trust me. And if I say I can't do that, then I just don't have the time, then they understand. Because the way that I work with a lot of my clients is it'll be project-based for some clients. And so that means that I'll have a set price, and then I'll say 3 weeks from now, I'll have a first draft to you. And that allows me to like plan out those 3 weeks really a lot better. And then I have a few clients who it's more of like hourly retainer. And if they need something that day, they can email me. And if I have the time, I'll do it. And if I don't, then I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. But I think that, I think you kind of have to decide what your life is going to be like in terms of hours worked, because I think a lot of people struggle with working too much, and my work-life balance is super important to me. I'm happiest when I am just taking time off to relax and live my life outside of work. So I don't have a lot of crazy deadlines, and I don't work lots and lots of hours. And I'm very clear with my clients that I don't do that.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to share maybe one more favorite project, and then I'll go to the chat and start having students ask you questions.
Let's see. Maybe this one. So this is it's called the New York Foundling. They are a nonprofit in New York City who does a lot of different things. Like they support foster parents, and they support people who need assisted living, and people who are living in homelessness. So they do a lot of different things. And so I got to help work on their annual appeal booklet and their whole campaign. So they had to, they still, they mail a booklet and envelopes and pledge cards to their supporters. And I got to work with an agency on this, which is nice. Sometimes as a freelancer, it's nice to work with an agency, because working with another human, they give you feedback, and you can kind of run ideas off each other. And there's always someone else to check if you've made a mistake. So for this one, we were working off of their main red color, but they didn't care what other colors we used. And so for that, because it's print still, I remember this is one of my first projects I did when I started working for myself. I had to buy a Pantone color book, if you guys know what that is. And so that is these like little cards that have the Pantone colors on them. So you can see what that red will look like when you print it. And that's really important too when deciding new colors for a brand, because just because a color will look like something on a screen doesn't mean it'll print that color. So I got to pick this color palette, and I wanted to play with this idea of they liked using their logo as a design element. So the background little shape is part of their logo. It's kind of like a person holding a heart. And so normally I would never do that, use part of a logo as a design element, but the client requested that. So I like this idea of having the huggy is what they call it, having this huggy behind the photos, like supporting the people. And then I also like the idea of the photos, the people would kind of pop out of the photo to show that they're breaking out of their situation. Like they, were kind of stuck in this rut, or stuck in this like situation that they couldn't get out of, but with the help and the support of the foundation, they were able to break out. And so it's kind of this symbolism with the photography. And then again, just using my kind of signature super bright colors. And I love playing with patterns. And so I thought that would be a fun way to differentiate the patterns, the huggy. And then, just being careful about also keeping lots of white space, and so that the images and the text can breathe, and like everything wasn't squished together. And so this is the booklet that was printed, and we just featured different family stories, and they gave me the content and photos, and then I kind of lay it out. And then we go back and forth on feedback. When I first offer these kind of projects, we'll offer 2 different versions. So before we went with this art direction, we also offered another art direction. And then once we decided on the booklet design, we got to go through and design the pledge card, which are those little cards at the top left, and design, you know, if people wanted to give money, what they would look like, doing letterheads for this project, and then also designing an envelope, which if you get into print design, like there are a lot of little things to think about. Like you think designing an envelope's really simple, but there's just knowing where postage should be, and there's certain areas you can't add any design, and you want to keep it really simple and clean, but also branded. And then we got to move that onto, like, you know, social media imagery, and that just involves, you know, knowing the correct sizing, and then mocking it up and knowing that when it comes up on here on an actual Facebook page, like nothing's blocking any text. But then, yeah, so creating those for all the different social media channels. Do you have any questions?
Very neat. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that one. I think
You're
that
welcome.
the range is really interesting. That idea of making an entire package for a client, and that all the package ties together into a singular vision, from the print to the social media to the envelope. I mean, I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm going to call on people from the chat.
Okay.
If you have additional questions, please add them to the chat. And the first person in the chat is Kelsey. Kelsey, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sure. I was wondering if when you're helping a client design their brand, do they usually have a general idea of what they want, or are you helping them develop that too? And what do you do to do that?
Yeah, so it just depends on the client. Sometimes a client will already have somewhat of a brand that you are taking those elements. So you're taking, like, they use purple a lot and they really like purple. So we might use purple still, but I will just basically come up with the other color palette to go with them. And I always start off doing any kind of branding with a client with a really long questionnaire where I ask them, you know, do you have ideas? And like, what are they? Who are your competitors? And then what are some companies, or who are some companies who are doing things that you really like, and what do you like about them? So knowing how to ask the right questions to get them to say more helpful information is super important. But so for example, today I'm finished working on this really small nonprofit. We did their logo, and now we're doing their branding. And before I even started the logo, I created 2 mood boards based on what her feedback was about what she wanted for her brand, because there were different ways we could take it. And so I purposely took them in 2 different ways to show, how, these opposite directions we could go. And then she looked at those and then chose the mood boards that she liked, which, if you guys don't know, mood boards are just a collection of photos that have colors and imagery that make you think something, have a look of a brand. And so she chose a direction for the mood board, and then I moved forward with the logo based on that mood board direction. And so the logo, that I offer 3 options. They choose one, and then we refine that one, like a few rounds. And then once we're done with that, I can go through, and I'm in the process now of creating a more extensive brand board, which is just showing the colors I've chosen based on the first mood board picked, the fonts I chose and why, and then photography ideas, and then extra like pattern or graphics that I think they should include. And so once she approves of everything in this brand board, which is just a collection of designs, right, that I present, we'll move forward with creating a style guide. So that is kind of like what I showed before, of showing exactly how to use the logo, with like the correct amount of space around it, which fonts to use, which colors. So yeah, so it just really depends. But if they have no idea, I start off with 2 options. Don't give too many options because then people get confused. I start off with 2 options and then move in that one direction.
So I heard in you talking about the mood board that you've had physical mood boards where you actually are pinning stuff up. Now, particularly in this time, and then when you're working with clients remote, how are you doing your mood boards? What's the technology?
I mean, I set it up in InDesign. It's just a PDF of 6 to 9 photos, of just one will have a color in it, another one will have like a pattern or some kind of object. Yeah, anything that explains what the brand imagery would look like. Yeah.
Kelsey had another question. You want to ask that question?
Sure. Let's see. There it is. As a mostly self-taught designer, how long did it take for you to work full time, and what did you do to get there?
Yeah. So, yeah, when I went to college, I got my degree in advertising and had taken like 1 design course where I barely learned anything. And then after college, basically decided I didn't want to do advertising. And I then worked at United Way doing, it's called AmeriCorps, which is really similar to Peace Corps, if you know what that is. It's just a year-long volunteer program with a nonprofit. And they would ask me to do infographics. And I just opened Illustrator and was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then realized I loved it and I wanted to do it for a career. And so I would say I started just doing little projects then, and that's when I started volunteering. And I would, I think I had an hour-long train commute each way for that job for a year. And I would do lynda.com videos for like half the time. And after that, I had done informational interviews while I was at AmeriCorps. Yeah, and I cannot recommend highly enough. I told this guy who sat near me, I was like, I want to be a graphic designer. Do you know anybody who's a graphic designer? And he had a friend, he had a colleague he used to work with like 5 years ago who was a UX designer, but started off as a graphic designer. And so I met with her and got coffee and was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. How do I become a designer? And she talked to me about all these different things. It was super helpful. Highly recommend informational interviews. And I finished my AmeriCorps term and I was still doing these kind of like like free work for small nonprofits. And I had about 5 things in my portfolio that, looking back now, were not very good. But, there was something. And from that informational interview, the woman I had spoken with got me my first graphic design job. And it was like as a junior designer at Chegg. And that's kind of when I started doing it. But even then, I was still watching lynda.com videos on Photoshop because I was still in the process of learning. But I would say it took me on and off about 2 years to really get Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign down. And that was just because I was forced to do projects that I had to learn, like if I didn't learn, it was going to be really awkward if I couldn't produce work at this new job. So I would just go after a day if I didn't know how to do something and like go on lynda.com and look up how to do it again and learn it. So it takes a while, but I would say the more time you put into it, obviously, the faster you'll learn. And I would say also there's like project creators online, or they'll give you prompts for what to do if you don't know what to do, or just come up with something you want to do and create that project and like give yourself a challenge where you have to learn a new skill set to do it. Yeah.
So, Valerie, would you stop sharing your screen so we can see you while you talk?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. It was great seeing your portfolio. For the rest of the questions, I thought this would be good. Okay, so the next question in the chat was from Nadia.
Hi, Valerie. I just had a quick question. I was wondering, when you're doing all these designs, do you ever use free-to-use assets, or do you fully use everything? Like, do you make everything? Like, I saw a California logo or like the state outline in one of your pieces. Do you feel like you have to ever make everything, or are you okay using like resources?
Yeah, so when I first started, I was like had a really tight budget. So I created everything. So anytime an icon was needed, I would kind of go and see what some icons look like and then go in Illustrator and recreate it myself or create one like it myself. And that is very time consuming. But and then for mock-ups too, like I try to not pay for them because there are a lot of free ones out there. So I always try to just use, or try to create my own designs, and I try to use free resources that are out there. But as I'm getting busier, there are certain things I will just pay for. So like for icons, there is this website called the Noun Project that has saved me hours and hours and hours of work because it's this huge collection, $20 a year for this huge collection of icons that already exist that other designers have created that are great. And I don't create my own icons all the time now unless I really want a very specific looking icon. So I think it just depends. I usually try to find something free first, and then if it doesn't exist, like exactly how I want it to look, I'll make it.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I was just wondering, what were those podcasts that you listened to?
So there's Design Matters with Debbie Millman. She's a really famous designer, and she interviews other designers who are all pretty famous too. So that one's good. And then I really like this one called Creative Pep Talk. The guy who is the host is really goofy, but he says all the things I want to hear sometimes. Like, just, it's really easy to compare yourself to other designers because their work is out there. And it's hard to like not, get kind of down on yourself, or if like I'll go through a rut where I don't have any clients. It's like I'll start doubting myself. And so I like that podcast because it's a pep talk. He makes you feel okay again.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Maria.
Thank you. Hi, Valerie.
Maria.
Hi. So as a freelance designer, how do you find new clients for your work?
Yeah. So that is there's no like one set answer for that at all. I'm constantly learning of new ways. So I think when I first started out, I would just look online, and there is stuff out there, but it's low paying, and it's not always the best clients. Like, it's people who want you to do a logo for $5, and you are worth, like, no one's logo is really worth $5 unless you're doing it to build a portfolio only. So I have only found a few clients just from like going through job boards, and in particular remote job boards. I have found one really good client who I still work with regularly, but that's rare. So I would say most of my clients are from networking. And that's, when I first learned that, I was like, oh, I don't want to network. But that is how I found them. Was I would just go online and find, like on LinkedIn, I would find a designer who does something that I like their work, and they live in the Bay Area, and I would ask them to get coffee. And that's really intimidating, but once you get there and you start talking to them, like, people want to help you. People want to, especially if you're like, I'm new at this and I want to be like you. I found that so many people wanted to help me, and I got a lot of work referrals. I got a lot of projects from just people I knew, or not even them. It's like they heard someone else needed a designer, and then they would come contact me. So that is just a great way, is find the people who do what you want to do and take them to coffee. Additionally, I would say post on your social media and you got to figure out how you want to do that for yourself. So some people will have an account just for their work, and on Instagram, right? And you can do that. For me, I post on my own personal account because I made I am the brand. So I'm kind of selling my travel blog and also like my lifestyle, but also with the design. And what I found for that is that, I have a friend from 10 years ago whose sister is starting a nonprofit. And she was like, do you want to do this work? You're really good. And I was like, yes. Like she found me the perfect client. What she's doing is exactly the work I want to be doing. So, and that's not a lot of the work, but it's always little bits. Like at first it won't be a lot of clients, but if you do good work, they'll come calling you, a year later, and then you'll add more and more and more clients over time. But yeah, I think the number one is just people, like networks help you find people.
So, and actually someone had asked a question about, have you found that Instagram has helped your discoverability, and have you found clients through Instagram?
Yeah, so I haven't had a lot of success, but I think I think it's just hard with the algorithm. And there's a lot of designers out there on Instagram. So I do think you should do it. Like you should have some kind of presence, but I've only gotten like 3 clients from my Instagram. But there are other designers who get most of their clients from Instagram. So it's kind of hit or miss. I wouldn't put all your eggs in a basket and only do your marketing through Instagram. But I think having a presence is a good idea. Any kind of presence would be good.
It's also someplace where people, even if they found you another way, can go and check you out, kind of thing. Even if
Sure.
you don't necessarily know that they came from Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've had things happen where I try to figure out how they found me.
Oh,
Like this little rabbit hole, and it's like, oh,
yeah.
Okay. You don't know what thing you did made it happen.
Yeah. And that's why on every social media account I have, I link to my website. So it's all about my portfolio. Like that is where I convince people that I know what I'm doing and I'm worth hiring. So before just posting stuff on Instagram, I would get a great online portfolio and really like spend time on it and make it like reflect you and look professional. And then I went through and also just created my own branding. So all of my social media uses the same photo. All of my like header images are the same image. And then whenever I describe my bio, it's the same little blurb about myself. And then just leading people to my website constantly.
So Mabel doesn't have a microphone, but she did have this question. Did you have a business background in your previous job? And if not, how did you learn it? And she loves your style.
Thank you. I wouldn't say I have a business background. I studied advertising, and in advertising, most of it is about research and like knowing your audience and it's strategy. So like advertising is a lot less about what it visually looks like, and it's more about this background thought process of design. And I would say that just helped me a lot because design is obviously so much bigger than making something look nice. It's about empathizing with your user and knowing how they would read something or look at something. And so I would say that my education definitely helped me with that. For business wise, no. I mean, I do a lot of, I worked on marketing teams. When I worked for anybody, I worked as marketing designer. And so in that process, I learned a lot about the marketing process versus just the design. So that did help. But when I first became a freelancer, I bought, what is it called? the Freelancer's Bible. And I read through that, and that explains how to have a business. It explains taxes are the most confusing thing to figure out at first. And, you know, just how to plan out your projects and your time, and how to like track your accounting and things like that. So I just read a freelancer's book, and I'm a very organized person, which helps a lot. But I am constantly just trying to learn new things via books or the internet. And there are so many resources out there. There's so much information and things are always changing. And there's always new information and new skills to learn. So yeah, I just am constantly like, I'll take time out of my day. I used to do a lot more, but I would take an hour out of my day on Fridays to just read a design book so I could keep learning.
Thank you, Valerie. Shirleka doesn't have a microphone, but she wants to know, how often do you need to meet with clients during a project?
It depends. If it's a client that I've been working with for a long time, they kind of know my style and they trust me. So they will almost always I'll have like an initial kickoff Zoom meeting. If they're close enough by, I'll go meet in person, but the vast majority, I just have a Zoom meeting. And that, you know, initial meeting is just to set up timelines and what exactly they're looking for. And then after that, it depends on the project. So if it's just a pretty simple brochure, I'll just email them what the brochure is, because there's not a lot of explaining to be done about a brochure necessarily. But if it's a brand, I'd probably have an initial kickoff meeting and then have a first mood board to them, and like 2 weeks later, and I would have a meeting with them and talk them through my thought process and then get their feedback. And then maybe, you know, 3 weeks later, I would have a first logo draft, and I'll meet with them to go over that. And then after that point, like after the initial first drafts of everything, I don't usually meet with clients because you only really need to meet if you have to talk through something. But a lot of times people are okay with me just emailing the more final stages of designs to them. So it's not a lot, but again, it just totally depends on the client. But it's not like, I probably have 2 meetings this week, so not a lot.
Awesome. Mabel has another question, which is, can you go through the general process of billing? Do you bill by the hour or by the project? You mentioned that clients can call you up and ask you to do something quick. Would that be part of your contract with them and not billed as an additional fee? Just some insight into billing, if you can.
Yeah. So again, and this is, for me, there's just different kinds of clients I have. A lot of the times, if I know them really well, we'll have more of an hourly contract. And so contracts are super important. If you're going to be doing any kind of freelance work, you need to have a good contract. And like, I can't really give you advice on that, but if you research it, there are websites that will either create a contract for you, or I just found free templates online. So have your contract, but then if I don't know a client super well, I will do a project like by project. I'll pay by project. So that would include a first meeting and talking about what they want. And I say, okay, and I get a lot of details about what the project would look like. And then I will go, and I use FreshBooks to do all of my invoicing, billing, and accounting. I have really enjoyed it. I've used it for 2 years and I really like it. So I will go create an estimate, and in FreshBooks, they have a template for how to do that. And if you have like a logo, you put your logo in there, and then it gives you all the information you would need. So I will estimate by the project. And so that is an hourly based thing. So you take your hourly price, and finding your hourly price can be really, there are so many blogs about it. I literally just went and found a pretty experienced designer, showed them my work and said, what do you think I'm worth? So know your hourly price and do not undervalue yourself, because people will pay you well. Like don't go low because you think people won't hire you. If they don't hire you, like don't work for them. Like value yourself. So I will set a project price based on the hours. So if it's going to take me 17 hours, I'll multiply my hourly rate by 17 hours and then have that one project price and then send them the estimate and they can approve it online. And once they've approved it, if I want to be really thorough with that client to make sure that they can't legally not pay me, like I would have all my ducks in order, I would create a proposal. And so that is basically just a document that outlines everything. So it'll have a summary of what the project is. It'll have the scope of work. So everything you're include like rounds of edits and what you're providing them. So if you're not going to be doing any printing services, say, I will deliver you a PDF of this. And then say there's a timeline part where you say, like, I'm always very approximate with my timelines. But say, we want our final date, we're going to have this done is this date. And so it's this long document and includes the pricing as well. Like the agreed upon estimate price, and they can sign that proposal. But this is also, if it's your first time working with that client, I'd give them a general contract. So once they've signed the proposal, it depends on the client. Some clients I will do have them pay 50% of the entire project cost up front, or I'll have, and then the final 50 upon delivery of the final files. If I trust them, I only send the invoice at the very end. I happen to only work with people who I really trust. And that is great. And not everyone's going to have that, especially when you first start. So I would just make sure that you have a contract, you have a proposal, and that you maybe get part of the payment up front and then part of it later on. And you can send invoices through FreshBooks. It's really, really easy, just emails it right to them. And then they can either pay online, they can pay by credit card, or you can have them do like ACH transfer to your bank account, or they'll send checks. And that's up to them. I leave it kind of up to how they want to pay. So for my hourly clients, it's a different contract. I just alter it to say, like, I will bill you every 2 weeks for how many hours I work and at this hourly rate. And that tends to be more for clients who I have an ongoing relationship with, not just a one time I need this one logo, right? If I'm working with them regularly, I'll do hourly because they'll want something next week. And there's no point in constantly sending them new estimates. And there's like benefits to both. So the project is nice especially for clients. They like the project price because they know how much they're paying. They're not worried you're going to do crazy hours. And so for when you're first starting with a client, they really like one project price. I would say, like, definitely add in, when you're estimating your time though, add in for all the meetings that you're going to have, for all the little rounds of edits, like any little bit of time you're going to spend on that project, estimate for that time. But yeah, so for the hourly, I only do that with people who I've had a longer relationship with, where we find that they just have lots of little small, like really quick edits they need, that it just wouldn't be worth my time to do an estimate and a whole process of invoicing them for every little thing. So we just do it hourly.
So it sounds like you work with people that you like, but the question I have in the chat is, if you work for friends, do you also set up a proposal? And an experience that this person had, and I think many of us have had, where a friend didn't end up paying the amount that was agreed upon. And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so a lot of designers will not work with family or friends. And I have attempted to work with family before and it did not go well, so I don't do it. I feel like with friends, I treat them like a normal client. I don't say, sure, I'll do this like side thing for you. It's like, oh, okay, you want that? Let's set up a meeting and we'll talk about it. And then I will send you a proposal and you sign the proposal. So I go through the exact same process with a friend, just because I think it also just makes you, I've gotten the feedback that I come off as very professional for doing that, even with someone I kind of sort of know. So I would just do it. I think it also, every single time you have an interaction with a client, it's like practice for the next client. So if I know somebody, there's a lot less pressure about the whole process. Like, if that makes sense, there's less pressure to get every little thing right because we have a relationship, but I still use it as a practice for future clients where I will email them how I would talk to a client, and I would, send the files in the same way, and I would present the work to them still in a really professional manner, because it's a less stressful way to practice for bigger, more stressful clients. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How strict are the timelines for the projects?
They're mostly strict. It is like a personal, like of importance to me to always meet deadlines. So it's not really something I've ever had an issue with of needing more time, because if someone says, oh, we'd like it at this date, and I kind of know how long things take me. So that's another thing. When you first start out, track how long everything takes you. I would just time myself, like, how long does a logo actually take? And I would do it for a lot of different projects so that when I estimated later on, I could just go look back and see how long things take. So if I had last week, a client came to me and was like, we had this last minute, really big project, do you have time? And it was really, really tight, but I was like, okay, no, I can do it. And I accepted it. And I had a really, really, really busy week. But I meet those deadlines. And I got to this point where I thought I could maybe need to move a deadline, but I think you have to know at the beginning. I ask my clients, like, how strict are your deadlines? And sometimes they're like, we want this to print by this exact date. And yeah, if you're going to take that project, like, meet those deadlines. There are other clients who are like, oh, just, as soon as you can. And I know that if I needed more time, I could say to them, so sorry, but like, this is taking longer than I thought. Could I, have until end of day tomorrow to finish this? And I think because I meet my deadlines so often, and they're not super strict, but I always meet them. If you need more time, like, clients will trust you and be like, oh, they really need more time if they're asking for it, because they're so reliable. So yeah, they're not super strict deadlines for my clients, but I don't take on work if I can't meet a deadline.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that was all the questions that were in the chat, and we are at the hour. Is there any last words you'd like to give to aspiring designers? And if you were in their position now, what, any words of wisdom you want to share?
Yes. So, yeah, I think first of all, just make sure that you are putting yourself out there. Like, go meet people, go get coffee with people and talk to them, because even though it's really intimidating, it's like, that is what is gonna help you move forward. And like, you just kind of have to do it. And then other than that, when I first started, I remember when I first went to college, I wanted to be a graphic designer, but I told myself I wasn't good enough. And so I did advertising instead, because I saw, I don't know what I used back then. Pinterest didn't exist. Whatever I used to see other designers, I would just think like, oh, I'm never going to be that good. Like, so I just won't even try. And it wasn't until maybe 5 years later that I, realized like, no, I actually want to do that. And it's going to be really, really hard and take a lot of work and a lot of time. And I'm going to probably suck at the beginning of it, but I'm going to get good. And so that's what I would say is like, it's so easy to compare yourself to people who've been doing it for a long time. And it's really easy to think that like people just won't want to hire you because your stuff doesn't look like theirs. But I'm just constantly reminded that it requires like grit and sticking with it and constantly learning new things. And imposter syndrome is real. I have it all the time. And just recognizing that like it's a slow process, but like you have to stick with it and you'll get there. Like you will be as good as you want to be one day.
Thank you so much. I really
You're welcome.
appreciate you being here, and I really appreciate the words of wisdom that you've shared. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Stop the recording.